Since Leo Varadkar took to the podium in March of 2020, my entire perception of this country has changed. With each passing day after the historical announcements, I found myself getting more isolated and more confused. The once believed friendly and intelligent people of Ireland could be observed standing in long lines, 2 meters apart, with their feet matching the painted footprints on the pavements. All would present their hands, many with cracked and dry skin, for a squirt of the alcohol gel before carefully entering any store. Unfortunately, even for those of us who found it all absurd, we too had to act like soulless bags of flesh, robotically participating to gain access to goods and services. But at least we weren't happy about it. As the weeks passed, so did the narrative. Every conversation had was dominated by case numbers and death tolls. 2 weeks to flatten the curve evolved into mask mandates, lockdowns, business closures, Garda checkpoints, laws and punishments. I felt like I was losing my mind. I was exhausted listening to the radio, watching the news, and engaging in conversation with people who used every opportunity available to express how awful everything had become because of the virus, taking the odd break, of course, to tell a stranger to pull his mask up over his nose. The virtue signalling had become a competition, almost like a drug. When the government started pushing out the vaccines, people couldn't roll up their sleeves quick enough, and indeed, they expressed delight at exercising their extra privileges as they flashed their shiny new COVID certs, which in itself was another virtue signal. Of course, those of us who drank our coffees in the rain knew it was all bullshit, but we persisted in our defiance, in spite of the constant vilification and ridicule. But I suppose I learned a valuable lesson from those 2 years, and it is this. Our political masters value force and coercion more than freedom and trust. They value it to the point of tyranny, and our people will readily accept a propagandistic narrative before facts and evidence. And not only that, but many will harass and bully you if you break the ranks. Needless to say, this nightmare experience of being surrounded by self-policing slaves has made me angry and resentful beyond belief. There is rarely a moment that passes by where I don't want revenge. Not justice, revenge. And with every new and self-inflicted crisis that takes place in this country, these feelings are amplified. The same people who praised the lockdowns are now complaining about the price of food and resources. The same people who begged the government to take measures to tackle climate change are the same people who beg government to help with their energy bills. They are the same people who complain about the price of fuel at the pumps. The same people who beg the government to build houses for a growing population are the same people who support an uncapped number of foreigners entering the country. I mean, how could you not be angry when you witness such hypocrisy and mind-numbing stupidity? And all while this self-harm is taking place, members of the 33rd Dáil are scheming in an effort to profit with our wealth, generated through blood and sweat, and our freedom being the payment. But the masses, the soulless, mindless masses, care not about the values and freedoms which have been historically used as weapons against tyranny. The same masses who marched against water charges or for the scumbag criminal George Floyd would gladly observe the very freedom which grants them the right to protest dissolve like a Panadol in a glass of water. The story of Enoch Burke, a man who sits in Mountjoy prison for defying to call a brain-damaged male teenager a girl. This story is absolutely scandalous, and while people like Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson and Stephen Crowder highlight this disgrace, there isn't a peep out of our elected TDs. Absolute cowards the lot. I want to be brutally honest. The only people keeping me going over the last number of years are the patriots and the lovers of freedom. I have fantasized about death every day since Varadkar reduced me to a serf. I have fantasized about taking all the 33rd members of the Dáil who voted for the Health Preservation Act 2020 and taking their lives in the most brutal fashion for the crime of desecrating the freedom my ancestors died for. The deep sense of resentment I have for my so-called neighbours and countrymen festers inside me like a rotting, cancerous organ. I have become an unrecognizable person who once would have stood between you and danger to a person who delights at your suffering. In recent months, these feelings of anger and resentment have taken its toll. I can only imagine how those who suffered under the Nazi dictatorship got on with their lives when it all ended. Sharing a society with people who would have marched them into an open field and shot them in the back of the head. I can only imagine those in opposition to the totalitarianism experienced were changed for the worst and died a completely different person to the one they were born. And this really brings me to the point of this video. For whatever reason, I am morally compelled to reject totalitarianism and lies. I am repulsed by the idea of man controlling man, whether through tyrannical or disproportionate laws, through lies, or through emotional blackmail. And this country has become a hotbed of hostility and hypocrisy as we walk along a path leading to a cliff edge. With all that being said, I will close by saying the following. Even with all the life-altering and soul-destroying fantasies of death and revenge, some of which I expressed through art, it would at the very least defy common sense to settle any vendetta. And as much as I want accountability, I will not make martyrs of any members of the 33rd Dáil, nor will I ever ask anyone to do violence on my behalf. I have expressed in other videos that I am willing to defend myself, my loved ones, and my property ruthlessly, as every man and woman should. But if the people of Ireland are not ready to hold those in power accountable, I will do nothing to interfere. I will bite my lip and carry on fighting, as any frivolous act of harm perpetrated on these parasites will result in a backlash that will cause irreparable damage to liberty, and I will not be responsible for that. However, should the day ever come when our people finally wake up, I will call for those to be punished severely for their actions, in the hopes that it will act as a deterrent. But for me, this fight will not end with the demise of the corrupt, but with a constitutional change that holds the rights of the individual supreme.